Gregg Talley is a key player in the US meetings and events industry. I'm talking to him about the challenge facing his company and the industry at large. Hi Greg, great to see you. First of all, tell us a bit about your company.
Well, we've been around 27 years, and we're one of those kind of combination firms that everyone says, where are the lines? We're an AMC, we're a PCO, and we do consulting work. So a little bit of everything. We do full service association management for US-based national associations and then international associations. And we do PCO work for US-based clients as well as international clients, and then consult all around the world on anything to do in association management or major convention planning and execution.
Give us an idea of some of the work you've done recently.
Well, it's fun because it's scope and scale, and it's everything from small corporate events for clients of 75 people, but very high scale, to we do one of the largest conventions in North America for 65,000 people for 5 days. So, and everything in between. So that's what makes it interesting for me, day in and day out.
So what are the key challenges facing your business at the moment?
You know, I think it's probably the same for a lot of us. How do we keep up with technology? How is technology impacting what we do every day, which is both has its risks and its rewards? I think that's what we're all learning. Number one, it isn't a threat to face-to-face events. It can actually drive more people to face-to-face events. But keeping everyone up to date on how do you use that technology, what's right around the corner, and how's that going to impact everything we're trying to do is certainly one of the biggest challenges.
And going forward, where do you see your sector going over the next, say, 5 to 10 years?
Yeah, I am very bullish on our sector in general. And I think it's interesting what's happening. In North America, the trend to outsourcing is just going crazy. So folks are really getting good at what's our key deliverable, what are we really good at, and then we're going to outsource everything else. So for third-party companies like ours, that's great. Some interesting discussion in our industry about, is that model the same in Europe? Or is that changing a little differently where we see more of the big standalone associations pulling more of what they may have been outsourcing previously in-house? So an interesting discussion about how are you selling your value? And if you're just doing commodity work, you are a commodity, and that'll be brought in-house. You have to be strategic, you have to deliver value, and you better figure that out, or you're a commodity.
And do you think that people have got over this idea that meetings are a jolly and don't deliver any value? Do you think that's now in the past, or do you think people have still got to be very, very careful?
I think you still have to be careful, and I think that's still how we talk about our industry and how we deliver value. And I think one of our challenges is we focused on numbers for too long. I understand why we had to talk about economic value, why we have to talk about jobs, why we have to talk about taxes, but we better start talking about what else we deliver in that face-to-face environment and why that's so important, because it's more than just numbers, right? We're transferring knowledge. We're delivering messaging in a key way that you can only do face-to-face. That isn't getting spoken about enough to really talk about the value equation of face-to-face events.
And how do you measure that? When a client comes to you and says, how can you prove that my event has actually worked?
Right. Well, I think that a segment of our industry hasn't woken up enough that we really do have to prove the return on the event, return on investment, call it what you will, but we better start measuring. Everything is measurable. If you know what the desired outcomes from the event are, you can measure it. The challenge is we don't have enough people measuring it. Some big international corporations are doing a great job at measuring what they actually result. Regulation and CME in the pharmaceutical industry and the medical industry has forced that kind of measurement in that field. In a lot of other fields, we aren't doing enough of that kind of measure to show the value of what's delivered.
Really interesting. Let's move on to some, sort of key person issues at the moment. Tell us your views on the whole PCO transparency issue.
Well, I think we do business differently in different parts of the world. And in the United States, it's just a fact of doing business. You have to be transparent legally with what we have to do, our accounting standards with what we have to do. So there can't be any confusion from that standpoint. That isn't necessarily the case in other parts of the world. And I think that's led to some blurring of what's the value, what am I actually getting for what I'm paying, and or where else and how else are you getting compensated, and am I aware of that? I think it ties back to that value conversation we had, right? If you do something for free, it doesn't have a value. Absolutely. So then you have a tough time ratcheting it back in and saying, oh no, you need to pay for this. And that's where I think for some of the European companies that did business for so long on the housing piece of it, with the internet, that's all disappeared. So suddenly they're trying to talk about value in another way, but they've been giving it away for too long.
Now, of course, you're an expert on the US market. What's going on with outbound business at the moment?
Yeah, so I think we definitely took a dip. Certainly there as part of our recession, there was definitely this kind of pullback in terms of what was happening in business generally. But I think that is just now starting to turn loose again as our economy opens up, as we see kind of the world economy opening up a little bit more. You can't be talking about global and not go global. So we don't have client one that isn't a strategic focus when we meet with them. What are you doing in this area? What should you be doing? And how can we help you do it?
And what kind, looking beyond the US to the kind of destinations that, you're looking at, to deliver value to your clients. What are the sort of key destinations on your radar at the moment?
Right, it certainly is the emerging markets, right? That's where a lot of energy is, that's where a lot of curiosity is. I also think you have to temper that by what's realistic, both in terms of the client event that they may be planning, as well as the reality in that marketplace, because we have a lot of stakeholders with our events, and is that marketplace really ready for our event, or do we go with something different? I think a lot of North American organizations make a mistake. They think they can take their standard annual meeting and let's go take it and put it here. It doesn't work that way. You have to understand that local market, test that local market, and then build from there when you have good partners.
And presumably it's all about leveraging the local culture to really make it something inspirational and different, isn't it?
Oh, totally. And I think a lot of times we don't spend enough time on that, right? To really make sure what you're delivering, that experience that you're delivering is not only in that case, what have we done with content, but what have we done to make sure they're getting a cultural experience to know why we're there in the first place.
And of course, a really key related issue is, the geopolitical spectrum at the moment.
Right.
How is that affecting, where you're thinking about holding events?
So I think one of the big trends that changed over the course of the last 5 to 10 years is risk mitigation on the part of the planner or the association executive has probably moved to become job one. So you start looking at that and saying, how do I reduce that risk? And you start looking at what's happening in the world. That certainly is a much larger discussion with everybody, and it's not necessarily just about safety, it's about everything. What are the political implications now if we make this decision with a destination, given some of the broader political issues that may be surrounding whatever's happening? So it's huge, and of course, we feel badly for the parts of the world that are experiencing some of these difficulties, but it has to be a reality that we reflect in looking at site selection or in looking at a booked piece of business. Is it sustainable in a place that is challenged?
Where worries you at the moment then? Let's pin this one down. Now they're aware of it, you're aware of it, let's just name it. Which areas worry you at the moment, which would make you think twice?
Sure. So I think Thailand right now is a challenge for people to understand what's actually happening where. And of course, a lot of people in the world don't reading these pages every day. A lot of this is localized in Bangkok. What people see is Thailand. So part of this requires some knowledge, but at the same time, how much can I overcome in a potential delegate's head when all they're thinking is Thailand, right? And the beaches are fine, the resort areas are fine, but they're only thinking one thing. Certainly, what's happening in Turkey right now is very interesting to watch on a number of levels. And then you look at the whole Eastern European issue, and some are calling it the return to the Cold War. Some fascinating issues around that in terms of, do we do something to show support? Do we do something to kind of take a step back from something that might have been planned in those areas? So I think there's a lot of very interesting things going on now about even just looking at there for a while, Russia was a partner, we could do a lot with Russia. Now has that changed? And would it be viewed as supporting Russia too much to now take a major meeting to Russia? So I think some fascinating political issues that every group has to decide for itself, right? You have to understand what are they trying to accomplish again, and is this good or bad?
Sounds great. Fascinating stuff. Greg, thank you very much for talking to me.
Thank you. My pleasure.